Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Tonight we're going to be talking all about how to take out the trash. And I don't mean the trash in your house as much as I mean the trash in your body. Now hopefully you haven't accumulated too much over the winter holiday season, but many of you have. And so I think it's the best strategy to really discuss detoxification tonight. How do we get rid of the things that maybe you shouldn't have eaten, maybe you shouldn't have been exposed to over the holiday season that are weighing you down and holding you back to achieve your best health. So there are 4 strategies we're going to be talking about tonight. Stay with me. We're going to talk about all 4, and at the end we're going to talk about different supplementation. We're going to talk about the major rule. Like, what is the major rule? What is the number one thing that you have to do before you attempt a detox? So stick with me through this as we go through the top 4 detoxification strategies. Now, these strategies will work no matter who you are, no matter where you're at, no matter how old you are, no matter whether you're male, female, it doesn't matter. These strategies are tried and true. This is basic physiology. This is how your body works. And so we're just going to talk about why it's important to tap into these things and how you may not be tapping into them. So the number one strategy as far as taking out the trash, right? Detoxification. And this is one of the most ignored of the strategies, is just simply breathing. Now raise your hand. How many of you have sat in a chair, workspace, station, or at school, where you're slumped over a computer, typing away at the keyboard and you forget to breathe, or you take a minute and you just realize and you have to sit up because your posture's going forward. Realize when your posture goes forward, one of the things that happens is you lose about 20% of your lung capacity. So if you're sitting at that desk doing this for 8 hours a day, you're reducing your lung capacity. And when you reduce your capacity, you also reduce your ability to breathe out. So what you breathe in, you reduce your ability to breathe out. So deep breathing becomes a very, very important part or mechanism of how the body gets rid of waste, gets rid of garbage. So when you reduce that chronic sitting, reduce that by 20%. That's your input of oxygen, okay? So that's your oxygen, which is very important for detoxification. You need oxygen to drive the metabolic systems of your body. But you also reduce, so you don't just reduce how much oxygen is coming in, but you reduce how much waste is going out, right? So waste going out, and obviously we don't want that to be the case either. So what can you do? How do we tap in to this parameter? Now, one of the best things that you can do is just become more aware of your breath and of your breathing. Now, what does that mean, becoming more aware? Becoming more aware of your posture, becoming more aware of how you sit, how long you sit, whether you take breaks. These are all important aspects to becoming aware of breathing. One of the easiest ways to start this, if you haven't already, is to practice deep breathing before you eat, right? So if you do this before you eat, and there's actually a benefit to this that's beyond detoxification. So practicing deep breathing before a meal. Most people, when they sit down to eat, many people pray. Some people, though, they sit down to their meals and they just inhale it and then they're back off to the races, right? Sit down. When you eat, sit down to eat. And one of the things that I encourage you to do before that meal is to do deep breathing. And do this for about 5 minutes. In and out, deep breaths in, hold, and then deep exhalations out. So that 5 seconds in, 3 second hold, 5 seconds out. It's a good pattern to begin with if you haven't done this before. But one of the things that this will do is it will activate parasympathetic nervous system. And this is one of the reasons why breathing is so important for detoxification. Because when you're healing, repairing, you're in this mode, you're in parasympathetic. When you're running and going and thinking and doing, you're in sympathetic, right? And so if we think about parasympathetic, this is digestion, sleep. We detox when we sleep, very important. So digestion, sleep, healing and repair are all things that happen when the parasympathetic nervous system is turned on, but also, again, detoxification occurs when this part of your nervous system is on. When the sympathetic part of your nervous system is on, when you're going and you're, again, you're going through the fast food line and you're inhaling, synthetic foods, etc., you're still in the sympathetic mode. And so what happens here in the sympathetic mode is digestion is slowed. So we have a reduction of digestion, a reduction of detox, a reduction of healing. And generally we get poor sleep, right? So we have a reduction in our sleep quality. And we also get, as a general rule, we get a reduction in our GI function. So not just digestion, but also bowel movement function. And one of the ways we detox is through our bowels. So if you're constipated, you're not detoxifying properly, and the sympathetic nervous system being turned on all the time is going to have a major impact on the way your digestive tract moves and functions and pushes nutrients into your bloodstream, but pushes waste out as feces. So you want to tap into your breathing, because breathing really accentuates and activates the parasympathetic nervous system with all of these benefits, while deactivating the sympathetic nervous system with all these potential detriments. So if you're not doing this, if you're not practicing this, if you find yourself shallow breathing, if you find yourself yawning frequently when you're sitting at your desk, it's because you're not getting enough oxygen. It's because you're not getting enough focus or giving enough focus to your breathing and to your oxygenation. So very, very critical. This is a part a lot of people leave out. They don't think of breathing as they would apply it to getting rid of garbage or detoxifying, but we definitely we want to activate our breathing. Now, you also breathe out toxins when you breathe out, and so some of you may find that, if you have a problem with this, meaning if you're not doing it, you're losing the capacity again for the waste to go out. You're losing the capacity for the oxygen to come in. So again, focus on breathing. And one of the best times to do it, to start this habit, is before you eat. So 5 minutes before a meal. Another great time to do this is when you're lying down in bed. When you go to sleep at night, when you're lying down and you're on your back or on your side, I recommend lying down on your back when you're getting ready for bed as part of your sleep hygiene, and just deep breathe and let your mind be at peace, let things go, let things relax, and really let that oxygen enter you, because this is, again, it's going to begin the process of improving all of these parameters. So breathing, very critical for detoxification. Part 2, how does the body get rid of garbage? Is through sweating. Now, sweating is very, very important for people, for humans. It's more than just the loss of fluid to cool down the skin. Sweating is a major detoxification route. Remember that your skin is the largest detoxification organ in the body. And we want to take advantage of that surface area and take advantage of detoxification through sweating. Now, how would we go about doing this? There's several strategies revolving around sweating. And the good news is generally they're all really well tolerated. Because one of the problems people have been exposed to toxins for too long is sometimes they don't tolerate detox. And we're going to talk about that too. So if you are one of those, you find that you try to detox, you get worse, you get sicker, stick with me. We're going to talk about those of you who don't tolerate detoxification here shortly. Sweating is generally tolerated by everyone, no matter who you are. And the best way to sweat is through movement, is through exercise. Now, there's several benefits here, aside from just, the obvious, which is what we're talking about. But exercise also moves lymph fluid. And so your lymphatic system, it basically helps to cleanse and keep your blood clean. And so when you don't have exercise, your lymphatic system can become more stagnant. The fluids can become more stale. You can get more edema, and you can have a harder time getting rid of those toxins. And so we want to move the lymph. And that's, again, another benefit of exercise beyond the sweating component. So exercise. Now, some of you may be exercise intolerant, and so you're finding yourself struggling to try to perform exercise. If that's the case, then we want to expose when appropriate, or when we can, we want to expose ourselves to the sun, to heat of the sun, right? So the heat of the sun is another way that we can get sweating. And then there's a secondary benefit to that sun, which is, actually there are many benefits. Vitamin D is one of them. One major benefit, and vitamin D plays a role in detoxification and blood sugar regulation and immune system regulation, so we definitely want to take advantage of that. But heat through the sun, and then some people will take it a step further. Maybe they live in a further climate that's further north, and so they don't have access to that, like the southern heat that we do down here in Texas. And so infrared is something that is commonly used in detoxification. Doctors use infrared in their clinics. A lot of people will buy infrared units or infrared lights to induce sweating when they cannot tolerate exercise. So this is a great way to sweat. If you're one of those people that don't tolerate exercise, infrared's a good place to start. Again, taking advantage of the largest detoxification organ in your body. And you'll sweat out all kinds of things. Now, some people, when they're sweating, will find their odor to be offensive. Like if you have a lot of toxic storage in you, you'll find strange odors coming out of your body. That can be normal. Don't let that scare you. I've had some people ask me that, hey, when I'm in my infrared, why does it smell so strange? It's because your body is pushing those chemicals out of you, and that will change the way that your sweat smells. So sweating through exercise, sweating through sunshine exposure, sweating through infrared are all possible options. Some people also lacking infrared will look at, heat, other kinds of saunas, maybe not infrared, but maybe dry saunas or even wet saunas where you're being exposed again to that higher level of heat to induce a sweat. Another really great way to induce sweating without spending a lot of money, if you have a bathtub at home, and that's to soak in Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate, Epsom salt, MgSO4, if you're looking for it, MgSO4, and then again, hot bath, which again just costs you the time to fill up the tub, and fill it up with the water that you can tolerate. Get as hot as you can tolerate it, and then submerge yourself in that hot Epsom salt bath. You will find yourself, you touch your forehead, you'll find yourself beginning to sweat the longer you're in that water, and you'll get a good deep sweat even though you're in water. And this is a good way to get rid of toxins. That's why so many people use that Epsom bath salt soak as a means to detoxification. Again, this is generally really well tolerated. Infrared is really well tolerated. Sweating in general is well tolerated, minus if you are exercise intolerant, minus if some of you are overly sensitive to the sun for certain medications that you might be on, or some of you are oversensitive to the sun because your antioxidant status is so poor that you can't handle radiation to any great degree, and so you actually have what you think is an allergic reaction to the sun. It's not an allergic. You can't be allergic to the sun, but you can be, let's just say, nutritionally compromised to such a great degree that your body reacts negatively if you try to go out in the sun. If that's happening to you, you need to get with an expert, you need to get with a specialist to figure that out, because avoidance of the sun is not the long-term solution. So again, sweating, very, very critical way that we take out the trash. Number 3 is urination, peeing. Now, a lot of people fail here, in my experience, because of this right here. They're dehydrated, and so their body's hanging on to that water, and so they're getting less out through the kidneys. Remember, the kidney is a primary filter of the blood, and so where does the waste go? The waste goes out right here, right? It goes into the toilet through that. And so if you're dehydrated, what you're really doing is you're concentrating toxins in your blood, and you're putting more pressure on your kidney, but there's not enough fluid to dilute some of those toxins, so you can actually make the problem worse. So it's very, very important that you have adequate water. General gold standard, I would just say, if you're trying to do a detox, or if you're embarking on a detox, like how much water is enough water? Most people will say 6 8-ounce glasses a day. That's not a bad recommendation if you're trying to do a detox, although you got to remember too that your food, if you're eating real food, contains, most of your vegetables are 70+, 80+% water, so there's a lot of water in the food that you eat. But again, the way I like to base a detox is that a person is going to the bathroom to urinate 6 to 8 times a day. That way we get adequate dilution, okay? Adequate dilution, and we're getting things out frequently, because you don't want to overburden your kidneys by, becoming dehydrated when you're trying to detox. Remember, part of what happens when we're detoxing is we're pulling chemical toxins out of our fat cells, we're pulling toxins out of our other tissues. The liver's having to convert those toxins from fat-soluble to water-soluble toxins, and then the kidney can then filter subsequently and do its job to get them out, or you can sweat them out, or you can, in some cases, even breathe them out. But we want to get, again, we want to get the fluids elevated enough that we're carrying these things out of our body and that our blood is not hypercoagulated or hyperconcentrated. So those of you maybe that have a history of clotting problems. So again, if you are a person and you've ever had a clotting problem, like a stroke or a heart attack, where your blood was shown to have a clotting abnormality, and we're seeing a lot of this in vaccinated individuals, we're seeing elevations in something called D-dimer. So if you've been vaccinated and we see elevations in fibrinogen, which basically these are proteins that signify that your blood is clotting microscopically, it's too thick. And this can put you in trouble, right? This can make a real serious problem for you as it relates to detoxification. One of the other things we're seeing is elevations in C-reactive protein, or CRP. So these are markers of inflammation and hypercoagulability of the blood, which is going to make it harder to get your blood, into the urine, and to get those toxins from your blood into the urine, because it puts more stress and pressure on your vascular tree and on your heart. So again, if you've got heart disease, you want to think about things that you can do naturally. Maybe you're on some medications, but if you're not, things that you can do if you've got that history of stroke or heart attack, what can you do naturally to keep your blood viscosity thin? So to reduce or to have a healthy blood viscosity, one of the best things to do is get enough omega-3 fatty acids in your diet. Omega-3 fatty acids keep your blood viscosity nice and thin. Magnesium helps with your blood viscosity, keeps it, where it should be. Now, there are other things, there are enzymes, and many of you, because of your history with gluten, your pancreas is compromised and it's not producing adequate enzymes, but many of the enzymes, especially the proteolytic enzymes, the protein cutting enzymes, they're called proteolytic, can help keep your blood viscosity thin down. Some people do things like nattokinase, which is a fermented soy nattokinase, to thin the blood naturally. And then ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo is another good one that, again, can help with this. Vitamin E can help with this. So you've got a lot of natural things that you can make sure you're incorporating into your diet, and even through supplementation, that's going to help support healthy flow of your blood without it becoming overly aggressively clotted or too thick, where your kidneys are struggling more as a filter, your liver's struggling more. Again, you want to take the pressure off of those filters. Almost think of clotted blood as if your kidneys were lacking function and you were trying to force more through the kidneys than what they could take. Almost like in your house, if you're trying to force more air through a filter that's already dirty, you're going to put more stress and more pressure on your air conditioner. It's the same kind of thing in your body. You want your blood to be, the viscosity of it to be nice and fluid. So one of the ways that is, even if you don't do these blood tests, if you've ever had your blood drawn and the phlebotomist makes a note and says, hey, your blood is really thick, it's hard to get it out, and it's coming out very, very slow into the tube, this could be a sign that your blood viscosity is too high, and that's going to create a problem and pose a risk for detoxification, among other types of illnesses as well. But again, 6 to 8 urinations a day. We want to get toxins out of the body through the kidney. And so very, very important that you're not dehydrated, and very, very important that your blood is not overly clotted. So again, making sure that these things are optimized before you begin a major detoxification process is important. Okay, number 4, how to get rid of garbage is pooping, right? And so this is a critical piece. This is, part of when we eat food, right? What is the purpose of eating food? It's to extrapolate nutrients and to excrete waste. And one of the things that happens is we get waste in the GI tract and the gallbladder, which secretes bile. The liver makes the bile. The gallbladder produces, through its muscular action, dumps that bile into your small intestine. And then the bile helps to emulsify fat. It helps to break down fats and digest them, and helps you basically to get fat absorbed, right? It helps to water solubilize fats in your diet so that they're absorbed into your bloodstream. But one of the other things that bile does, it's very good at when it gets here, is it binds toxins in your GI tract. So if your diet's poor and you have, let's just say coming in, you've got a lot of toxins because you eat junk food and you eat highly processed food and you eat non-organic foods and you're in fast food and you're eating and drinking the chips and the soda and all the other nonsense, that's a lot of toxins. Well, a lot of these toxins will come out in your poop, which is good, but remember your bile will bind to toxins, and when it binds to them, there's a large percentage of your bile in your distal small intestine. So as that bile is coming through, it's binding toxins and it gets reabsorbed back into your bloodstream. So remember that bile can bind toxins. If you're eating a lot of them, it can bind them. Those toxins can be reabsorbed into your bloodstream where they get trapped between your liver and your gut. That's called the enterohepatic circulation. So it's this blood flow that goes from your gut to your liver. And so, again, we want toxins out. We want to minimize the toxins coming through the GI tract as much as we possibly can. So that means you're trying to eat clean and trying to eat organically. And so if you're not doing that, you're going to get a lot of enterohepatic damage. We see this. There's a lot of research studies. They show this with different types of environmental toxins, but also with different types of what are called bacterial toxins. There are certain bacterial toxins that live naturally in your gut, but if you have an imbalance, these toxins are called LPS, lipopolysaccharides. What they've shown is that they actually break through, they go through your entire enterohepatic circulation. They actually can damage your liver and damage its ability to do better detoxification for you. Remember, we want our liver to be able to neutralize poisons and send them to the kidney through the blood so that the kidney can filter them out through the urine. That's part of what the liver's job is. And so, but if we're doing things within our diets and within our GI tracts that can actually cause damage to the liver, we know that LPS can damage the liver. We know that gluten is a major cause of liver damage, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Obviously, alcohol can damage the liver as well. So again, toxins, right? Gluten is a toxin if you're gluten sensitive. Alcohol is a toxin no matter who you are. Don't kid yourself. LPS from bacteria are toxins. Some people have a yeast overgrowth or a yeast problem in their GI tracts, and yeast can produce toxins. Those same toxins can damage the liver. Yeast can convert carbohydrates in your diet if they're living in your gut into alcohol, creating the potential to damage your liver. So there's a lot going on in your gut. And so that's why you have to take special care about what you put in your mouth, because what you put in your mouth is in your gut, and then your gut's got to deal with it. And remember, the primary function of the GI tract is that it's a quarantined zone that prevents the poisons from making it into your bloodstream, and it poops them out. So if you're pumping in more poison than food, you're going to have a hell of a problem on your hands with detoxification. And that's going to become a major downfall in your health, because this is a default in detoxification, or a deterioration of detoxification is really step one to the progression of chronic degenerative inflammatory disease. This isn't, you don't necessarily always find damage to the liver on your doctor's blood test, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. Some people will have normal blood tests for their liver, meaning normal ALT, AST, ALT, normal alkaline phosphatases are common blood tests that doctors will run to measure damage specific to the liver. Sometimes they'll run bilirubin, which is another good one to run if you're running tests. So these are markers, blood markers. They won't always be abnormal, but you can still have liver damage. And the reason we know that is a lot of times a liver ultrasound will show fatty infiltration which means that your liver's struggling. And this is a big reason why, is what you put in your mouth affects and potentially damages your liver. So generally the liver doesn't struggle. The liver will struggle for two major reasons. One, it's what you eat, and two, it's what you're exposed to, even if you're not eating it. It's things you might be exposed to environmentally. And we'll see things like mycotoxins, mold toxins damage the liver. We'll see other pollutants, other VOCs and other chemicals that we're being exposed to through breathing, through water, etc., that can also put pressure and damage the liver. But diet plays a major, major role in that. Diet also, and this is one, we're talking about pooping, yeast are notorious for causing constipation. And so they'll stop your body from taking out the garbage. And so you've got a yeast overgrowth, and many of you watching this do. It's very, very common. You'll actually suffer with a constipatory effect that will make those toxins stay inside of you longer, and it gives them an opportunity to breach through your gut lining to start impacting your liver and really putting stress and pressure on your liver. So we gotta make sure that the bowels are moving. Now, how often should the bowels move for good detoxification? 1 to 2 times a day, right? The GI transit time in a healthy gut is 12 to 24 hours, typically speaking. Now, some people's gonna be a little faster, some people's gonna be a little bit slower for varying number of reasons. There are a lot of things that can affect the bowel movement even beyond what you eat, the level of stress that you're under, the time of hours in a day that you spend in a fight or flight mode. That sympathetic mode is going to impact this. There's a lot of things that are going to impact your poop chute, if you will. And so we want to keep it flowing well. And some of the best ways to keep this flowing well for detoxification is just to start with what you eat. You don't necessarily have to go buy a bunch of supplements. You just got to start with not eating fake food and not fooling yourself into thinking you're eating something healthy that isn't. Like one of the things that we see a lot is food in packages. They've got pretty healthy looking packages with eco-friendly stamps and stickers and everything else, but the actual food itself in the package isn't food. It's chemicals with manipulated flavoring agents under the guise of health. And of course, if you're falling prey to that type of marketing, then you're gonna pay a price with your ability to detoxify. So again, the fourth strategy is how well your bowels are moving. So again, we got pooping, we got breathing, we've got sweating, and we've got peeing. Those are our 4 primary routes of excretion. And anytime you're going to do detoxification, you want to make sure that those 4 routes of excretion are working well. Remember, each route is a major route. And so if you cut one off, it's like cutting 25% of the points off of your test, right? So now you're sitting at a 75. And if you go into a major detoxification protocol and you're constipated, or you don't ever sweat, or you're sweat exercise intolerant and you haven't been sweating, or you're dehydrated, you're going to set yourself up for failure in that detoxification program. So you've got to make sure these 4 strategies are in play for your detox. Now, what's the number 1 rule of detox? What does it mean to detox? Like, that word gets thrown around a lot, to detox, to take away toxins, right? So where do the toxins come from? Well, they come from food, air, water, and various sundry other things. So, where I see a lot of women, for example, get exposed to toxins is cosmetics and lotions, soaps, shampoos, air fresheners, right? Things that aren't naturally in the air, chemicals that are sprayed on fabrics and on your clothing when you buy them brand new, and on your carpets and in new homes. Like, these are all things that we would classically consider toxins, right? So food, air, water, skin, again, what you put on your skin. And so in this case, cosmetics, lotions, soaps, etc. So number 1 rule is to quit adding toxins in. I'm going to give you an analogy. Imagine you're in a boat and you're in the middle of the ocean, and your boat's got 8 small holes in it, and so water's just slowly coming into your boat, and you magically have 2 things that you can do. You have a bucket by which you can bail the water out of your boat, and then you have a set of oars with which you can row your boat closer to the shore. Now, if you row your boat, if you decide not to bail water and to row your boat's going to keep taking on water, the rowing's going to get harder, your arms are going to cramp, and eventually your boat's going to sink. If you don't row your boat, you'll get no closer to the shore, but you'll bail water, but the water won't quit coming in because the holes are bringing water into the boat. And so eventually your arms will cramp up and your boat's going to sink and you'll be no closer to the shore and you'll die. So how do we avoid that analogy, right? Well, that's where number one rule is to not retox. So we plug the holes. If you plug the holes, get creative. Plug the holes. Then you can bail. Then you can row. But this has got to come first. There's an order, sequentially, there's an order to detoxification. And most people start in the bailing strategy. And the reason why, if you're this way, don't take offense, but a lot of people are just lazy. They don't want to acknowledge the truth. They don't want to start with the truth. If you're following the 30-day challenge, the No Grain, No Pain 30-day challenge, read the first chapter. Some of the first words in the book are, all progress begins with the brutal truth. You can't lie to yourself, right? So you can't tell yourself, I want to keep doing the things that I know are unhealthy, and I'm just going to take this really good protein that helps me to detox, or I'll just take extra glutathione or extra NAC, or I'll take some type of liver detox formula that has milk thistle in it or artichoke in it. Like, you can't do that, right? Because it's like you bailing water, but the holes haven't been plugged. You have to stop detoxification coming in, and if you don't do that, you're doomed to failure. And so what you'll end up for a lot of people, what ends up happening is they spend a few $100s on supplements, don't get any further, and actually feel worse during their detox. Now, what many people will do is they'll stop the retox for like a month, right? So they'll commit to a diet change for a couple weeks or a month, right? And they'll feel really good, and they'll be like, wow, I'm flying high, I'm feeling so much better because I'm doing these things. And then they'll get to the end of the month and they'll go back to their old habits. So they'll go back to this, right? They'll retox. And so then their problem just comes right back. So again, you have to think of your long-term strategy with any kind of detoxification as a long-term strategy, lifestyle change, and not just, hey, I'm going to do different than what I've typically done for the next month, and then I'm going to go back to my old ways, because your problem's just going to keep coming back and you're going to continue to struggle. So remember, this is number one rule. You can't, it's impossible, it's non-negotiable. You cannot negotiate with this rule. You have to eliminate toxins to the best of your ability. And you can't always eliminate 100% of the air and water toxins. But this is why doing this intelligently, we use good filters, right? So air filters, I like HEPA, ultrafine HEPA air filters, water filters. If you have your own well water, a good carbon KDF filter works. If you're on the city water, you need reverse osmosis and you need to put electrolytes back into the water when you do that. But those are filters that you should have in place. We live in a world where, we've traded convenience and technology for the potential of poisons as a byproduct of that convenience and technology. And so if you're going to choose to participate in the convenience and technology, then also participate in the technology that helps from overwhelming your liver and your kidney and your other internal filter systems. And then food. Now, the great thing about food is this is a major player here, and this is 100% under your control. You get to choose that, right? You don't always get to choose. If you're stuck in traffic behind somebody whose car hasn't been inspected in 25 years and it's got black smoke coming right out and the exhaust is hitting you, you don't always get to choose that, who you're driving behind necessarily. But you can choose the food. You can absolutely choose the food. And so you should, and you should choose it intelligently. And you always start with the premise of eating real food. Real food means when you look at a food label, it generally has things you recognize, things that you could find growing on a real farm, things that you don't have to have a biochemical degree to pronounce, right? So if you pick up a food package, one of the trends right now, and I hate to see this happening because I'm just going to vent here for a minute, is this whole plant-based diet movement. Now, I'm not opposed to people eating more plants, and especially certain types of people who are better matched to more of a plant-based diet. But what I'm opposed to is large corporations using BS propaganda to sell you fake meat that isn't really plant-based, and tell you that it's healthy, and then also to tell you that you're going to save the planet. I mean, how much stress do we want to put on our young generation to make them feel like they're responsible for saving the planet because all of a sudden plants are better than meats, and that it's like they've forgotten biology and they've forgotten the carbon cycle of the planet, and that we need animals to produce manure so that plants can grow. And now we're trying to call animals dangerous and detrimental to the environment. Yet we're saying that at one side of the mouth, but then we're propping up this fake food that's, you know, full of soy and protein isolates derived from genetically modified grains and peas and other things. And then mixed into all of this, we have synthetic vitamins and hemoglobin, which is basically protein from cow blood, right? So even though it's supposed to be plant-based, you guys know what I'm talking about. If you've gone to the fast food restaurants who are pimping this stuff as healthy, to this younger generation who's maybe got a little bit of naivety and a little bit of growth ahead of them, but making them feel horrific. And we're going to see more and more pressure on farmers to do more and more plant-based foods, which, again, this whole notion that animals are somehow evil and a threat and a cost to the earth is a ridiculous notion. So anyway, rant ended. Choose your food wisely. If you think you're buying plant-based foods with all these ingredients that you can't pronounce, you're not choosing your food wisely. You're following a trend. And if you think about all the trends that we've seen just in the U.S., right? Let's just go walk through history on the different food items they told us to eat that actually, after 20 years of people eating them, we actually came back and retracted, hey, no, it's not actually as good, right? What was one of the first ones? Margarine. They said margarine's better for you, which is what? What is margarine? Margarine is hydrogenated corn and soybean oil, generally from genetically modified foods. But they said, eat that instead of butter because butter's unhealthy for you. And today we know that hydrogenated vegetable oils are one of the most cardiovascular inducing foods. But for decades, they told you, eat this, not that, right? And then we heard sugar is bad, kind of, and so eat this artificial sugar instead. And so you can recall sulfame and saccharin and, you know, Sweet and Low and NutraSweet. And then today now there's a new one, sucralose, which is chlorinated sugar. And all this stuff is nonsense. None of it lowers your blood sugar. None of it helps you regain or capture health. But people still do it because they fear sugar more than they fear chemically altered sugars or chemically altered amino acids to taste like sugar. Then we were told at one point, remember, we were told that breast milk isn't as healthy for babies as formula milk. And then what happened is record-breaking levels of cretinism in children because breast milk was vastly superior to any form of man-made concoction that doctors or nutrition companies could come up with. And so each time we've been told, do this, not that. Remember in the 80s we were told low fat is the way to go and that fat is the enemy, and we did low fat diet for almost 20 years and obesity doubled in the country, and heart disease and cancer and diabetes, all those things increased. All why? Because the experts, the bought and paid for experts, the ones that were bought and paid for by industry, were telling you to go down this rabbit hole of do this, not that, and every time it's the same mistake, which is you deviate away from something that's real for something that's man-made, because some of these men and women have the, we'll just say the audacity to claim that they can make a process thing better than God can, and that's a ridiculous notion too. So don't get caught in that trap again. We've learned that lesson enough from history to not get caught up in it. So if you're thinking about these plant-based meat products as a solution to the crisis, you call it a pseudo-crisis, if you want to, then you're wrong, and I just want to stop you from going in that direction today. Okay, well, let's dive into some of the questions that you guys have. So, just diagnosed with lymphocytic colitis, was told by a prominent doctor it has nothing to do with gluten. On budesonide for 2 months, notice lymphocytic colitis isn't mentioned much. What are your thoughts? Lymphocytic colitis is definitely caused by gluten. I've seen a number of cases go completely into remission by changing diet. So if you are working with a prominent doctor who's denying that nutrition has anything to do with lymphocytes infiltrating into your colon. I mean, what is another reason lymphocytes would infiltrate into your colon? You could have an infection. I don't know if he's ruled that out, so you might ask him or talk to him to rule out any type of microbial imbalance within your colon that might be leading to that colitis. But outside of an infection or microbial imbalance, really the only thing that generally tends to lead to lymphocytes infiltrating into your colon, what are lymphocytes? They're immune cells that are designed to help protect you from something that's there, right? So what you're putting in your mouth is the only thing that ends up in your colon. And so we have to look at food first. Any GI doctor who says food's not part of it, in my opinion, is if it were my doctor, I'd run away. I'd run away and call him a charlatan, because that's just nonsense. But again, maybe you've got a good doctor, maybe you just haven't had a deep enough conversation. Hard to say. So Lindsay's asking, can we set up a distributor in the UK for our different gluten-free supplementation? Lindsay, if you've got a distributor you want to connect my team with, be happy to. We've looked at doing this a number of times, and it's tended to fall through. So if you've got a distributor in mind, we'd be happy to communicate with them. Let's see here. Hi, Dr. Osborne. What can cause a leaky bladder all day long? Could this be gluten sensitivity from muscle weakness, or what else can cause this? Lots of things can cause that, Laura. Leaky bladder could be that you have weak pelvic floor muscles. Leaky bladder, that could mean that you have an infection or a microbial imbalance within your bladder. So those are really probably two of the more common ones I would suggest that you look into first. But the other thing we'll see sometimes, like a PT with an expertise in pelvic floor, sometimes just doing the right exercises to strengthen the muscles around your pelvic floor can really help with that. And that's an area that you might consider starting first if you're not having symptoms of urinary tract infection, which would be like burning or pain of urination. Also sometimes see leaky bladder occur in people with oxalate issues as well. Let's see. Nicole's asking, how can I lower liver enzymes? AST is 57, ALT is 103, both are high. I also have Hashimoto's and fibromyalgia. So if you're trying to lower your enzymes for your liver, so understand that it's not an issue of lowering your enzymes per se. It's an issue of finding out why your enzymes are high. So again, I'm going to skip this slide for just a minute. We'll come back to it. The first question you have to ask is, why are they high? Why are your liver enzymes elevated in the first place? What would cause elevation of liver enzymes? For many people, if you're not drinking alcohol is a big one. Gluten is a huge one. We see this all the time. I mean, they're aside from the fact that in my clinic where I see people's fatty liver diseases reverse on the regular, there's a lot of published medical research and studies on the relationship between gluten-induced liver damage. And so if you're not on a true gluten-free diet, that might be one of the issues. Excessive carbs can also be part of the problem. We'll see this a lot in people, excessive carbohydrate diets. And so some people will go keto for a short time and they'll watch their liver enzymes drop. And so you may be consuming too much carbs. What's too much carbs? Generally speaking, 33% of your total calories should be carbohydrate. If you're at 40%, 50%, 60%, you're probably overeating carbohydrate on a regular basis. And this could even be from healthy carbs. So like fruit's a healthy carb. A number of vegetables are healthy carbs. But again, you could be overdoing it, and that could be contributing to it. Because what too many carbs do is they drive up triglycerides. Triglycerides are fat. Your body takes excessive carb, converts it into triglycerides, and then it takes those triglycerides and shoves them into the liver, and that creates fatty liver, and then you end up with elevated liver enzymes as a result of that potential process. Something else that can cause it, that I see very commonly, is yeast overgrowth. And one of the reasons why yeast can actually be a source of alcohol when you have excessive carbs in the diet. So excessive carbs plus yeast produces alcohol, damages the liver. That's a possibility. And another one that I commonly see, so let's say you're gluten-free, you don't drink alcohol, your carbohydrates are under great control, you're on a keto diet, and you don't have a yeast overgrowth. Another very, very common finding that I'll see is a person has a mold issue, mold toxicity. And some of the mold toxins, the mycotoxins, can actually damage your liver and can lead to elevations in liver enzymes. Now, outside of that, you may be taking prescription medications. Many of the medications are processed by the liver, processed through the liver, and so you got to be cautious there. If you haven't had your water tested, sometimes there are chemical components in the water. In the Houston area where I live, there's 42 different prescription medications identifiable in our water after the city's done filtering it. You know, what your water looks like depends on where you live. You might look at testing your water, but these are all things that you need to investigate first. Now, if all these things are fine and good, then generally what happens to liver enzymes is they start dropping. And you don't have to do anything. You just have to figure out why it's happening. That's the amazing thing about your body, is that it heals. You know, what some people would tell you to do is take a liver formula. I mean, and I have a liver formula. We have something called Ultra Liver Detox, and it's got a number of different key ingredients that are very beneficial to the liver. They support the liver's ability to do its job. But if you don't figure out where the damage is coming from, again, this is number one rule, is that you do not retox. And so you got to find out why the liver's taking on excessive damage. You can't just throw supplementation or support at the liver and expect you're going to resolve that problem long term. You're just going to be putting a Band-Aid over it. Do night sweats and hot flashes in early menopause count as sweating? Hey, they do, yes. If you're sweating through the hot flashes, yes, it definitely counts. I like this. Charlotte's commenting on what I said earlier. Armpits smell like onion and garlic. That's not uncommon to see that when people are really doing a good detox, is that sweat will really smell. Why do some people sweat so much more than others? I have to take a lot of electrolytes when I exercise because I just pour sweat anytime it's warm out. Well, some people have different metabolic rates than others. We all have our own metabolic machinery, and some people are more prone and sweat easier. I'm the perfect example of if I'm not aggressively exercising, I'm not going to sweat really much at all. I'm a harder to sweat person. Now, there are some people that just don't sweat. We see that a lot in people that are overburdened with too many toxins, as their sweating mechanism actually shuts down, and that as we get them better and better and better, they actually start sweating again. But as a general rule, there's not like, why does one person sweat more than the other? It just has to do with your uniqueness. And you know, unfortunately, if you're a heavy sweater and you didn't want to be, it's kind of like saying, I wish I had blue eyes instead of brown, or brown eyes instead of blue. It's just, there are certain aspects to our physiology that we can't control. Let's see here. What would be the cause of bloating without eating beans? I mean, that's such an open-ended question, because there's 1,000 things that could cause bloating. You could have a digestive damage to your GI tract where you're not producing adequate digestive enzymes. Your pancreas might be underperforming. Those are two probably pretty simple places to start. You could also be a person that's underproducing stomach acid, and so with low stomach acid, a lot of times your food's not digesting, and your food ferments and it creates gas, and then you bloat. So look to digestion first, but really look to things that hinder digestion or that could assault your digestion. Should we filter the bath water? Does it not really matter as long as you use it? No, you should filter the bath water. If you're going to take that deep Epsom salt bath, definitely you should filter your water. I mean, I recommend it if you're watching this and you don't have a whole house water filter, especially if you live in the city, you definitely want to filter that water. Now, if you're on a well somewhere out in the country and you've had your water tested and it's pretty clean, or if your well is hundreds of feet deep, remember, you've got the best filter in the world, which is hundreds of feet of earth. That's a fantastic filter, better than any filter we can produce as man, carbon filters or KDF filters. So, but yes, I definitely recommend that you filter your bath water as well. So question coming in, how much of what my white willow formula is it? It's got white willow bark in it. How much would I recommend taking daily if a doctor suggested me to use aspirin therapy to avoid stroke? I would simply challenge the notion of taking an aspirin to avoid stroke, because, or heart attack, because now the studies are coming out that there's really not a huge benefit to taking it. to reduce your risk. So I would just talk with your doctor and challenge that notion in the first place. Again, there are better things to use to keep blood viscosity from being aggressively clotted. And so again, I gave you a number of them, but antioxidants, vitamin C, vitamin E, magnesium, nattokinase, proteolytic enzymes, all are beneficial. If you want to do stronger, you can take ginkgo biloba, which can also naturally thin the blood. But I think those are better options even than white willow. And the reason why is white willow is relatively benign, but it's a natural form of acetylsalicylic acid, which, one of the long-term problems with aspirin, including white willow, is it causes a degradation of the mucus lining in your stomach and intestines. And so you don't want to just use it indefinitely. It's designed to use acutely and not designed to stay on forever, just in case. Because again, you end up paying a risk ratio of what happens when your GI tract lining starts to slowly deteriorate over time, as it can pose other kinds of risks for you. What's my feeling on beets for the blood? I think if your blood sugar's under control and you're eating real beets and not like a processed beet-like substance for your blood, as far as it's not so much for your blood as I like beets for vasodilation. The beets actually help really and strongly dilate your blood vessels. And a lot of people, as they age, their blood vessels become more rigid. And so beets help your body to produce a chemical called nitric oxide, which is very dilatory of your blood vessels, so it can open them up and improve your blood flow. How much vitamin E depends on the person, but generally anywhere from 400 to 800 international units is a good place to start. What do you think about ion cleanse? The foot baths for detoxification, I know a lot of people swear by them. I'm just not a big fan of those. Not because I don't think they may not work for a person, but because there's no great scientific research on them. And I'm more of an objective science guy than I am just try this because other people say it works. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do things anecdotally, but before I make a broad spectrum recommendation, I want to make sure that there's some real research behind it. In a lot of these detox foot baths, I've seen people, I get people all the time coming to my clinic that have been on those things for years and they're still struggling and they're not any better. So I just, again, number one rule of detox is not which gadget or gidget or supplement you can take. It's why is there a toxicity issue and what can you do to fix the holes in your boat, not necessarily what can you do to row closer to shore and have your boat still sink before you get there. Let's see here. Cheapest way to test for mold. The cheapest way to test for mold is probably, if you're talking about mold in your body, it's not mold in your body. So to be clear, your question has multiple layers. The cheapest way to test for mold in your body, so there's a lot of different ways. So understand what mold is, first of all. Mold could be yeast. So like Candida is an example of a type of yeast, but you can also have external environmental mold growing in your body. For example, you could have aspergillus growing in your lungs. You could have mold growing underneath your toenails, right? And you don't need a test to see mold, that big, thick, white growth underneath the nail bed. You've got mold growing on your body when that is the case. But it's hard to see it in the lungs. If you're asthmatic or if you've got mold in your environment and you're having a hard time breathing, for that type of test, usually like going to your pulmonologist and having a culture sputum, where they do a culture on the sputum that you spit up. Usually they give you a device you blow into and it helps to rattle your chest and bring mucus up out of your chest, and then they get that mucus and they culture it. Now, that type of test requires holding onto the culture for several weeks, and the problem with that is a lot of doctors will only try to culture it for a few days and then they'll throw the culture away. But it can take mold weeks to actually grow in culture. So you've got to make sure you've got a doctor who knows that and who's doing that test right. There's cultures that can be done of the GI tract because you can have yeast that grows in the GI tract. There's cultures that can be done of the sinus cavities because you can have mold growing in your sinus cavities. So if you're talking about identifying mold growing inside of you, there's a lot of different types of tests. They're all relatively expensive. So there's not like a cheap way. Now, if you're talking about mold toxins, meaning the toxins that mold produces, there are urine tests that can be run to measure for the presence of those mold toxins. But that, again, having the presence of mold toxins doesn't necessarily mean they have mold growing inside of you. It could be that you're living in a moldy home and being exposed to these mold toxins through the air. That's just they're different things. And so again, that question, it's got a lot of layers to it. And so we're going to be talking a lot this year about mold. So just stay tuned and keep tuning in, and we may get you better answers along the way. Better in-depth answers, but I don't have time to get into all of that tonight. Is bentonite clay good for detox? Can be, but again, going back to what's good for detox, I mean, bentonite clay, charcoal can be good. Zeolite is a great binding agent. It depends on the kinds of toxins that you have. If you're trying to detox your liver, for example, bentonite clay is not the best choice. If you're trying to, cleanse your colon, bentonite clay could be a pretty good choice. So it just depends on what area you're trying to really effectively have detoxification on as well. I love this. Marcus says, good evening. Glad to have your vast knowledge on celiac and gluten sensitivity. Being corn sensitive, I'm starting to get better after decades of not knowing corn as a gluten. I love to hear that. Thanks for that feedback, Marcus. Maybe somebody else listening to this is hearing that for the first time. And if you are, and you didn't know that corn had gluten, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Grab your copy of No Grain, No Pain and get started on the 30-day diet. Because if you've got celiac as a diagnosis and you've continued to struggle, it's probably because you never really truly went gluten-free. Do I recommend an enema for cleaning out the bowels? Sometimes yes and sometimes no. Just depends on the situation. What's a good dose of S-acetylglutathione? A good dose, if just for general like liver and health and support, anywhere from 500 to 1,500 milligrams a day, depending on your size, is reasonable to take without creating too much of a ruckus. Is it true that the way we breathe determines how alkaline and acidic we are? In part, but it's not the only thing. I mean, there are a lot of things that determine the pH. And remember, the pH, a lot of people oversimplify pH. They shoot for always saying alkaline, alkaline, alkaline. But the different areas of your body have different pHs. Your stomach has a pH of 2. Your GI tract should have a pH of about 6.5. Your blood has a pH of about 7.5 or so. So different areas have different pHs, and so don't get caught up so much in focusing on how you can always be alkaline. I think there's a lot of we'll just say misleading conceptions about that. If dill pickles have mustard seed in the processing, would this be contraindicated for a grain-free diet? No, mustard seed's fine. If IgA for anti-gliadin is elevated, does that confirm gluten sensitivity? No, it confirms gliadin sensitivity, Suzanne. Gliadin is found in wheat, barley, and rye. Gluten, there are many different types of gluten. There are hundreds of different types of gluten. Gliadin is only one of those types. So an anti-gliadin antibody test confirms that you're reacting to gliadin specifically found in wheat, barley, and rye. Are medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane still considered a nightshade? I am reactive to nightshades. No, lion mane is not a nightshade. I don't know where you heard that, but that's wrong. So whoever told you that misled you. So yeah, you're okay with lion mane if that's something that you want to consume. Did you have a specific brand recommendation for the light to help improve the circadian rhythm system? So yeah, sunlight. The brand is called Earth Brand. And if you just go outside of your house, you're going to soak it in and it won't even cost you any money at all. Let's see. Autophagy, is that good for detox? What is the minimum time needed to turn it on? You turn on autophagy in 24 hours. So if you're going to do fasting and you're trying to activate autophagy or autophagy, you can turn that on within 24 hours of a good fast. Now, there are different benefits the longer you go, but then you hit a certain point where you don't want more autophagy. You want to start healing and repairing and renourishing your body. So, I mean, for most people, as a general rule of thumb. Most people don't need to go longer than 3 days if you're trying to do like a more aggressive fast. And some people do up to 7, but if you're doing intermittent fasting on a regular basis, you're going to get autophagy on a regular basis from that. If organic isn't available, but an item suggests non-GMO, how valuable is that? It depends, Diane. I would call the manufacturer of the company and ask them, where do you source your product? Because the non-GMO, in my opinion, the non-GMO label, how many times do you think the company that makes money off that label actually goes out and investigates the farm where that product, or the company where that product is being produced? I mean, I use non-GMO on some of my products. We have the label, but you know how many times we've been investigated by the non-GMO people? We've not. So I don't trust those people with those labels because they don't do the job that they're claiming that they do. It's more like lip service. And so, like in our product line, we actually do in-house testing. And that's why I can feel confident about saying what we say about our products, because we do in-house testing. We do in-house testing. The product comes to us and there can be all kinds of claims made about the raw ingredients, but we do our own in-house testing to make sure they're not liars, so that we catch anybody who is lying and we send that garbage back to them and we quit using them as a supplier. But most companies don't have that type. I shouldn't say most. Many companies don't have that type of integrity. So you have to be really careful. I don't trust a lot of the non-GMO stuff, and really the organic stuff, in my opinion, is becoming less and less trustable. I'd say your best bet is really to find a great farmer's market in your area, or a great food co-op where you're buying from local farmers that you can actually talk to, shake their hand, have a conversation with them about what they're growing and how they're growing it. To me, that knowing where your most valuable resources are coming from directly, and knowing the people that provide them, to me, provides you with a great and valuable insight versus buying from a mass conglomeration company who may or may not be honest in their dealings with you. 10 days, no caffeine. I love it, Lee says. 10 days, no caffeine as per the Osborne protocol. Good, so moving in the right direction. Can a very itchy back indicate release of toxins, especially after sauna or at bedtime? It can. It absolutely can. Very itchy. You're getting a histamine response, most likely. And that, yes, it can absolutely indicate a release of toxins. Yeah, I can't get overheated due to MS. So if you've got multiple sclerosis, generally you're heat intolerant. And so in that particular type of situation, you're going to have a harder time with that sweating component until you get the MS under better control. And the MS can get under better control. I don't know what you've been told, Karen, but MS is an autoimmune disease. And again, we've talked about causation of autoimmune disease, but one of the biggest culprits in MS is gluten. Another big culprit is vitamin B12 and vitamin D deficiencies. So if you aren't on that road and on that track with no grain, no pain, I highly suggest you get there, because we see a lot of people with MS do really well and are capable of tolerating sunshine and heat again in their future. Let's see. Doing the 30-day challenge is from Lynn. Is chicory okay to use as coffee replacement? Yes, chicory is okay. Check it. Some brands of chicory contain wheat and barley. They contain like a barley sweetener. So just check the brand you're using. Not all brands do. It's an additive in some chicory coffees. So if you've got a clean chicory, it's perfectly fine on no grade, no pain. Why is there so much focus on calories, but very little focus on education on nutrition? I don't know. I don't want to answer that question and say that I know what the thought process behind the people that teach university level nutrition courses or doctorate level nutrition courses, what their intent is. But it's sad, because we're stuck in, it's like being stuck in the dark ages and nutrition. Like we can move beyond the conversation of carbs, fats, and proteins, and eat candy to raise your blood sugar if you're diabetic. Those are all moronic, ancient, antiquated thoughts that have been inundated into our society, and doctors don't study nutrition really at all, so they don't know any better to correct anyone for the most part. And again, if you're a registered dietitian, don't take offense to this if you're following me, but I mean, even in registered dietitian in their schooling, a big part of the focus is not on micronutrition, it's on macronutrients and weight management. And so, unless you're an RD or a doctor who's gone on beyond your graduate level training into postgraduate level training, it's just not something that's going to be taught in the mainstream. It's just sad. Let's see here. I get intestinal blockage, which I thought came from grains. It seems I can't tolerate vegetables either. What can I do about this? Is it possible this came from pernicious anemia? If you're getting intestinal blockage and you're getting it because of vegetables, you probably have a major issue with your digestive system in general. So like your GI tract might be damaged, not adequately producing digestive enzymes. It could be, part of that could be pancreatic dysfunction or insufficiency, stomach underproducing acids, another potential there. But in my experience, people that do really poorly that way, Leslie, do really well following what's called an elemental diet, which is maximized micronutrition with minimized calories for a time to allow their guts to start healing and repairing. But we also see great progress and improvement in people following no grain, no pain. But sticking to that, what you've recognized, which is, remember, that falls under the third rule of nutrition, which is very simply, if something that you're eating creates symptoms that are negative, then you might want to look at that and reevaluate the need to eat it. And I've seen this a number of times where the doctors will tell somebody, you got to eat your vegetables, you got to get your fiber. And every time a person tries to eat their vegetables and fiber, it wrecks them. And they keep doing it because their doctor said keep doing it, despite their body saying stop doing it. So you've got to, at a certain point, you got to listen to your body. This is where a lot of the growth of the carnivore movement, the carnivore diet, came from, is that a lot of people don't tolerate grains and plant-based foods, and so they've gone more toward meats and organ meats as a means to get their nutrition and find they do much better. And what I have seen in a lot of carnivore people is that they do really well, and then they can come back at a later time in the near future and start tolerating more foods again, because they had to go extreme in order for their bodies to heal. They had to go far to one end of the spectrum in order for their GI tracts to make a recovery before they were capable of tolerating those foods again. And in other cases, I've seen where people were still eating foods they were allergic to or sensitive to, and it wasn't just necessarily all vegetables that were part of the problem, but it was certain ones that were creating an immunological response, shutting down digestion, creating bowel dysfunction. Let's see here. Go down on the left side for me. Oh, so Lindsay's asking, what if your gallbladder's been removed? Yeah, that's where I was coming with this, because I saw that question coming before. If your gallbladder's removed, you want to use something like Lipogest. And what that has in it is it has bile and other agents that help your liver properly produce bile, because when your gallbladder is missing, you can still make bile, but you just don't. Remember what the gallbladder is? It's the muscular sac that helps to jettison bile into your small intestine to help you digest your fats. And so what happens with a lack of or an absence of a gallbladder is you miss the timing. So you could eat your meal, but your bile might not hit the intestines along at the right time in order to help you process the fat in that meal. And that's where taking a supplement at the right time with the food can actually help with that. So that's something that if you've had your gallbladder removed, that you can do supplementally. Now, the other thing that you have to consider when your gallbladder has been removed, it probably means that something was damaging your liver too. And so if you haven't gone back and worked with your doctor to identify what was creating the problem in the first place, then all you've really done is a surgical correction that wasn't a real correction. It was a temporary fix. Let's keep going down on that left side. Keep going a little more. Can you detect a fatty liver through an ultrasound? Yes, it's one of the ways doctors will test the liver to determine whether or not it's got fat. Let's keep going. How can you remedy too much yeast? Too much yeast, number one way to remedy, there's 4 strategies along getting rid of a yeast overgrowth. Strategy number 1 is to flush them out. Linda. And if you watched the show last week, I talked about doing a vitamin C flush, doing what's called a detox C flush. And so you might go back and watch that replay to get those specific instructions. So flushing out the bowels is one way to start the process. That's really what I would consider to be part one. Part two is nutritional support into the GI tract. And so the three other things that 2 and 3 and 4 that you'd want to do is, number one is create competition for yeast. What is competition for yeast? A good probiotic, right? And particularly a good probiotic with S. boulardii. We have something called biotic defense with S. boulardii. This is competition for yeast. So we're trying to make it harder for them to grow and to flourish. So we want competition for them to take the resources away from them. Number 3, you can use some natural antifungals. A lot of people would, jump to garlic and oregano, and eating those foods richly because they have known antifungal and anti-yeast properties. What we found in our testing, so when we actually test people, and we do cultures, in the GI tract to identify yeast, a lot of the times what we find is that these individuals have yeast species that are resistant to the standard oregano and garlic. The yeast growing in them won't react. In other words, using these two things naturally, oftentimes they won't work. And that doesn't mean it won't work for you. It just means that when a lot of the people that come visit me will actually measure this, and they have resistance. The yeast inside them have resistance to oregano and to garlic, like 95% of the time. And so one of the things that I really like to use is, there's a couple of things. One is caprylic acid, which is a natural plant-based acid that really makes it challenging for yeast to grow. And another is something that we have called Yeast Shield. And that's a rich microbial formula with multiple different types of plant compounds that have known antifungal properties. And so the other thing, though, that's super important, so those are 3 strategies. The 4th strategy is to starve them out. Remember, yeast thrive on carbohydrate, energies, and sugars. So you really have to look at your diet, and you have to make sure that you're adhering to a diet that is free of sugar and that is minimized. And no dried fruit. We always recommend take dried fruit out of the diet. We have them limit their fruit servings predominantly to berries and no more than 1.5 cups a day. Like, these are all just strategies that you can implement that will help. But if you've got a nasty yeast overgrowth, it's probably best to see somebody and really get it figured out specifically and unique to you. Health consequences of removing the gallbladder. So follow up to the other question Rita is asking. So the biggest health consequence is fat malabsorption. Fat malabsorption, why is that a health consequence? Most people are like, yeah, low fat, let's do it. I don't want the fat, it's gonna make me get fat. That's not true. Omega-3, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. These are all fat. And when you don't have a gallbladder, you minimize your ability to digest and absorb these nutrients. That's why if you look at several of the formulas that I've designed for these nutrients, they actually come in an emulsified form, meaning that even if you're lacking a gallbladder, the form I'm putting them in bypasses that. That's on purpose. We do that for a reason. But this is your biggest issue, and here's what we see clinically. It's generally about 5 years. Remember, fat-soluble vitamins store in fat tissue, so it takes a little bit longer for them to become deficient. Or can. So generally, we see about 5 years post cholecystectomy or gallbladder surgery, we'll start seeing this show up in a big way. That's the biggest issue. So then the next question then is, what are the symptoms of deficiency of these nutrients? And there are hundreds of them. But one of the symptoms is diabetes. Vitamin D deficiency causes dysregulation of blood sugar, so it can increase your risk for the development of diabetes. Vitamin A deficiency causes inflammation of the GI tract, inflammation of the skin. It makes it very, very hard for your cells to turn over and repair. Vitamin E deficiency causes lowered antioxidant function in your body, so it puts strain on your liver, puts strain on your selenium storage. in your thyroid. Vitamin K deficiency, depending on which vitamin K we're talking about, predominantly we're talking about vitamin K1, which is necessary to help coagulate and clot your blood so you can develop blood issues. And then omega-3 is very critical for the prevention of dementia, heart disease. It's very critical for regulating blood viscosity. So again, there's a lot. You say, what are the risks? It's the risks that come with these deficits, in my opinion, that are the biggest danger long term. And so when you have a gallbladder surgical removal, what should have happened, and maybe it did for you, maybe it didn't, I don't know, I can't speculate, but you should have had a nutritional consult before that surgery to explain that to you. And you should have had a nutritionist telling you to take these things supplementally in emulsified forms, or to take a supplement, as I was talking about earlier, before and with your food, something with bile in it, like Lipogest, where you're supporting your body's ability to properly digest and absorb the fats and the fat-soluble nutrients. Otherwise, in my opinion, you're just playing with fire. You're going to end up deficient. It's just a matter of time, not a matter of if, it's just a matter of time. Can NAC alone raise glutathione levels? Yes, it can. Do you also add glutathione in conjunction? You can take glutathione as well. Glutathione is not as easily absorbed in the GI tract. That's why we use acetyl glutathione, because it's better absorbed, it's better handled and absorbed. But NAC, dosage-wise, if you're trying to get a good supportive glutathione production, anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams is a good place to start, just depending on how tall and not tall, but how much you weigh. I have an alpha-gal allergy from a tick bite, not vegetarian by choice, but I understand what you're saying. I miss meat. Yeah, I feel for you, Heather. I don't know if you've worked with somebody, but you might consider working with somebody, because I've seen people with Lyme make a comeback and be able to reintroduce meat. And so that, again, that may be something that you're able to do. Just working with somebody is probably the right way to go about doing it, so that you don't end up restricting your diet indefinitely. Some of my vitamins have polyethylene glycol. Throw them in the garbage. Those aren't vitamins, those are poisons. They say you don't metabolize it, so it's okay. And polyethylene glycol is poison. Why would you want to eat it or put it in your vitamins? I mean, I don't know where you're buying your vitamins, but that's poor form. Yeah, in the industry, we would call that a junk vitamin. I could imagine which brands you're probably buying, because some of the major brands that people think are good for them are actually garbage. Let's see. I have Hashimoto's, therefore leaky gut. I do many things to try to heal my gut. I have zero symptoms, thyroid or otherwise. How can I know if my gut is healed or not? And is that even possible? I have been gluten-free for many years. Well, if you're asymptomatic and you feel well, if you have Hashimoto's, that means you still have antibodies against your thyroid. That means you still have an active autoimmune process going on within your body. If that's what you're asking me, if that's what you're saying, then you've still got an issue that you haven't resolved. You've still got something that you don't know what is triggering your problem, even if you're 100% gluten-free. So there may be other foods, there may be other things that you're missing, Karen. I'm sorry, without more information, it's just hard for me to get granular with you. Let's see, let's keep going down on the left and on the right as well. This time, let's see, I think I got that. Does time restricted, yeah, I think I answered that. Time restricted feeding, so yes, time restricted feeding elicits autophagy as well. I'm unable to get outside first thing in the morning where I live for the sunlight, too cold to kick in the circadian rhythm for optimal sleep. So in that case, if you're trying to get some light exposure, that will help with your circadian, there are lights that generally they're what are called happy lights, and you're looking for something that has 10,000 illuminations or higher, 10,000 LUX. And you set them about 18 inches away from your face in those winter months. And if you're getting ready in the morning, example, going to work or something, you just put that on your bathroom counter, and you have it there as you're getting ready for your day. And so that's going to help you if you're in those northern states where sunlight's a little bit more scarce. Can you drink matcha? You can. It's super high in caffeine, so it's not something I typically recommend if somebody's struggling with gastrointestinal issues, because caffeine's a gastric irritant. Let's go down a little bit. Is it true that if one has a bad underpit odor is due to consuming too much sugar? Not necessarily too much sugar, just doesn't have to be sugar is my point. It could be, there are a number of things. It could be a number of things. Let's keep going down the left. When is my book coming out in Spanish? Rita, I'd love to know the answer to that question. Look, we have sent so many requests to the publisher. Unfortunately, I don't have control over it because I published with Simon & Schuster Touchstone. So they get to make and call all the shots on what languages it gets published in. We're published in 5 languages, and Spanish is not one of them, which I found a little bit surprising. But how do you, those of you listening, if you want a Spanish version, here's how we can get this done. Send letters to Touchstone, Simon & Schuster, and request it, because the more requests they receive, this is what I've been told, the more requests they receive, the more they make the consideration, and the more they seek out Spanish book deals, from Spanish-speaking countries. So again, that's the way we get it done, is we demand, demand is going to make them push a little bit harder, but as of this moment, they don't have any plans to do a Spanish publication. And contractually, I can't convert it into Spanish and sell it myself because I've got a contract with the publisher. Do you do any meet and greet or book signings? I do. We have, our requirement for a meet and greet book signing is that we have 100 people or more present, and if it's somewhere where I have to travel, that my travel expense is covered. Unless it's somewhere I'm going to be naturally already, and then if you try to make that arrangement happen and I'm already going to be there, definitely we can try to do that. Gloria is asking about sarcoidosis. What's the limit of vitamin D I can have? My doctor said I need it in my diet. You do, and the problem, Gloria, with sarcoidosis is too much vitamin D will flood you with, that doesn't always, but it can cause your serum calcium to elevate. So if you're going to do any vitamin D supplementation, generally with sarcoidosis, you don't do high doses. You can run into a problem. So, 1,000 to 4,000 units a day. But if you're going to do that, you definitely want to work with your doctor to have him measure and monitor your calcium levels. Because if your calcium goes up too high, it can pose a problem and put you in cardiac arrhythmia, and it can give you a heart attack. It can hurt you really badly and put you in the hospital. So you've just got to be extra cautious around not megadosing with vitamin D. And again, working with that doctor to make sure that they're monitoring your calcium levels to prevent that problem. Okay, let's keep going. How much fructose can the average person handle daily to be considered safe? There's not a magic number. We get people all the time that can't tolerate fructose at any really great level. Copper deficiency will make it almost impossible to metabolize fructose. So there are varying factors, but it's not like a magic number, stay in this level, or this gram level, if you will, of fructose, good or bad. Generally speaking, my advice is keep your fruit servings to, under 3 servings a day, and you'll get some fructose from beyond fruit, from some vegetables, from certain things, but generally speaking, you're not going to overdo it in a major way if you keep it reasonable. So Total Life Hacker says, I've been on grain-free for years. I'm doing carnivore the 4th time, still having inflammation and pain. I have multiple autoimmune disease. Do you have any suggestions? You need to find a doctor who knows what they're doing. If you already see a functional practitioner and you're not better, and you've been doing this for years, and you're not working with somebody who, in my opinion, honestly knows how to guide you the best way, you need to find somebody with better experience. Because you shouldn't be still struggling. I mean, remember there's 4 primary triggers of autoimmune disease, and I would say that probably you haven't had them accurately measured, or you haven't had them all measured and addressed simultaneously. Those are some of the biggest things we see. If you go back and read the last chapter of No Grain, No Pain, I talk about that very thing in the chapter on functional medicine. And I talk about a concept called piecemealing. Go read that. And if you feel like your functional practitioner you're working with is piecemealing your care, and you're working with the wrong individual. So can you use Ultra Digest? So Betty wants to know, can you use Ultra Digest without drinking 8 ounces of water before you eat? Yes, it's just a generalized suggestion. You don't have to drink 8 ounces of water as a requirement. Do I recommend taking vitamin E for hypothyroidism? No. Vitamin E itself is not going to treat your hypothyroidism, but if you're hypothyroid and you have vitamin E deficiency, then yes. But again, I would recommend more than just taking it for hypothyroidism. I would recommend getting your vitamin E levels checked, and if they're low, then you can take it. But vitamin E is not, it's not going to reverse a hypothyroid situation typically. I mean, if you go back one year and watch, I did a pretty lengthy crash course on the thyroid, and I talked about all the nutrients, all the vitamins and minerals that are necessary for proper thyroid hormone function. So you might go back and watch that and look more at that, because vitamin E is not at the top of my list as it relates to the thyroid. Do I recommend grounding when sleeping? Yes, it's not a bad idea. I actually have a Beamer mat that I love to sleep on. But grounding sheets are another option. And then sleeping in the great outdoors occasionally, camping can be an option for great grounding as well. With everyone taking, Janet's asking, with everyone taking 50 milligrams of zinc or higher these days, could that dosage be causing copper deficiency? It could be in some of you. Long-term without measurement isn't a good idea. If you're taking zinc prophylactically for cold and flu season and then you quit taking it, you're probably not going to run into much of a problem. But if you're taking, 75, 100 milligrams a day indefinitely without having your levels checked, yeah, you very well could create a copper imbalance that could create a problem. What if your pancreas is removed? If your pancreas is removed, you got a pretty good problem. You need to really work with somebody directly in a one-on-one environment, because there's not like a magic thing to do. You're missing one of the, probably not your whole pancreas is removed, probably a part of it, but you really want to work with somebody who's doing objective measuring to help give you specific guidance. So I think I mentioned, if you have your gallbladder out, I recommended Lipogest and Ultra Digest as two things to help support digestion. Any product specifically if you've had your appendix removed? Yeah, in the first month of having your appendix removed, you should use what our product is called Ultrabiotic Defense. Remember, your appendix is actually a storehouse of extra bacteria, so when you remove that, it's like removing your reserve tank of good probiotics. So taking probiotics post-surgically is a very good idea for up to 8 weeks, but at least 4. I missed one. Go back up just a little bit. Get a little bit more. Oh, no, I got that. Okay, so Pat, are you taking new clients? Yeah, just you want to call my office, Pat, 281-240-2229. We limit how many we take, so we only take a certain amount each year, but yes, we still do take on new folks. What causes excessive sweating? Depends, lots of things. Caffeine can do it, excessive sympathetic overdrive can do it. Let's see here. Is a magnesium blood serum 4.4 okay, or do I need a mag? So blood serum is an inaccurate way to measure magnesium, so I wouldn't even look at that test and give it any kind of great degree of credit for accuracy. So again, serum is one of the worst ways to measure a nutrient, especially magnesium, which is so critical and has so many different functions. And you got to measure it in other than the serum. It's just not a great place to measure it. If you've got a good doc, ask them to measure your red blood cell magnesium and ask them to measure your white blood cell magnesium, and that would be a better place to start with the measurement. Safe dose for zinc, anywhere from 25 to 100 milligrams, depending on your size and depending on how long you're going to take it, and depending on whether you're deficient in it, depending on the status of your GI tract. So, but generally speaking, really safe dose is 15 to 25 milligrams a day, conservatively a safe dose to take. Do I recommend Lugol's iodine and boron as a good detox? Not really. If you're using Lugol's iodine to detox, so what is iodine detox? For the most part, iodine is really great at detoxifying bromine, chlorine, and fluoride. So those are the things that I would use iodine to help you detoxify from. I mean, don't get me wrong, iodine is an essential mineral. It's very important for thyroid function. It's very important for hormone regulation. But as an overall, would I recommend iodine and boron as a sole means of detoxification for the whole body? No, I would recommend it for detoxification of other halides. Again, the type of detoxification varies. We should maybe do a whole breakdown on all the different ways to detoxify, but it's just such an in-depth topic. Okay, I think I gotta go home and eat. It's already half an hour. I didn't even realize it. I've talked for half an hour over time. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. If you did, I've done my job this week. Hey, look, if you're new to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain, come back next Monday. We're here every Monday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you don't want my information censored, go sign up. Go to glutenfreesociety.org, sign up for my newsletter. It's really becoming the best way to make sure that my information is not being censored in your social media channels. We're under fire, so you guys know why we're under fire. But anyway, sign up for our newsletter if you want to make sure that you stay abreast of all things health, nutrition related. Look, wishing you a fantastic week and evening. We'll see you next Monday for another episode. Take care.